we can either parent from fear or we can parent from a place of power, love, and a sound mind. Well, I really wanted to protect my kids from overexposure. But the more that I learned, the more I realized that it's my responsibility to be able to not just protect my kids from things, but expose them in a safe way with my narrative around it so that they see things the way that I believe and see things. They have literally worked and helped my children protect themselves when my children were asked to do inappropriate things. One of my sons looks at me and he's like, "Has that happened to you?" If you're anything like me, you still send them to grandma's house. Like, why did I ask? Hi, I'm Jenny. Welcome to my channel. Today, I want to talk to you about some books that I've used to help protect my children from pornography, protect them from being touched by other children or adults, to teach them about their bodies, and to teach them about the birds and the bees in an age-appropriate level. Let's get into it. I actually start off with a bonus book, and this one is not about the birds and the bees. This was actually about feelings. I had one of my children that was really struggling with overwhelming feelings, and I had read a parenting book called The Whole Brain Child. One of the analogies that they explained, they said, when you think a thought pattern, it creates these neural pathways in the brain. And if you imagine having a block of hot cheese and dropping a hot marble through that cheese and it burrowing a path, then any other marble that you put on top of that cheese to find that hole will take that same path. That yes, you can diligently work hard to try and recarve that path, but the more marbles that go down that path, the more thoughts that go down that neural pathway, the more it strengthens that route of least resistance. And so in that same way, your child's first exposure to things like sexuality, gender, those sort of things, they will develop that first neuro pathway. And so if we want to develop a healthy neuro pathway for our child's brain, then we need to be the first ones to present the information to our children. And once it explained that, I realized oh, I need to talk to my kids about some things that I've really been working very hard to shield them from. I think in our society, it's hard because if you are a Christian and you believe the Bible, then you believe very specific things about sexuality, about marriage, about things like that. And we can do the best we can to shield our children from alternative understandings. But the thing is, just being in society nowadays, just even commercials on TV will expose your children to things that should not be normal for little children. So I was able to have conversations with my kids about these things and develop those neural pathways so that in the future, when they encounter these things, they will already have a healthy biblical neural pathway to be able to lean on to view what they're understanding through. Does that make sense? So I developed the lens and I wanted to share with you some of the books that I used in that. This first one, very helpful. In The Whole Brain Child, they talked about name it to tame it. That means if the child, the right side of the brain is the side that's emotions and feelings and all these things. And so when you get overwhelmed and you're stuck in that right brain, to attach it to the left brain, which has to do with logic and language, is to be able to stabilize it and to stabilize the brain. And so if someone's feeling very angry and you help give them the word anger, then it actually balances and helps stabilize the brain and actually brings it down a notch. And so being able to say, are you sad? Are you angry? Are you overwhelmed? Then brings it down a full notch. And so while this has some concepts in it that are maybe slightly new agey, I would just honestly take those parts out and then just re-say it to my child in a way that's very Christian based. And so we talk about, instead of meditating or something, I talk about taking a deep breath and saying a prayer to God, and so this is very editable. But the good thing about it is it goes through each emotion: fear, overwhelm, sadness. It talks about what that emotion feels like. And basically you're giving your child emotional intelligence to be able to have language for what they're feeling and being able to articulate it. My third kid is so good at articulating his emotions after going through this that he's like, when that happened, I felt overwhelmed and this is why. And he is able to really articulate how he feels. And guys, that's really great. I don't know if y'all know men, but I have 5 boys and I'm super proud that they can articulate what they're feeling and why they're feeling it, because a lot of our older men, sorry, just aren't so good at that. Okay, so this is a series that talks about the birds and the bees at an age appropriate level. Now, I will say that this is probably not my idea of the age brackets on here. Like, for instance, this one's 12 to 16. This one's probably more like 14 to 18 in my book. This 3 to 5 year old, this has a lot of information in here. And so it basically goes through and it just talks about like a baby is born and there's boys and there's girls and there's mommies and daddies and they fall in love and heritage and things like that. I will say that like this one's pretty tame. When you get to the 5 through 8 year old, there's a lot of information in here where it talks about specific body parts and genders and has a little more pictures. And honestly, like this tells enough information that for me, whenever I read it to my 3 oldest boys, I read them this one and then dismissed my 3-year-old at that time. And then I read them this one after reading this one before getting to this one, which is the 8 through 12-year-old, which is what should have been for my oldest son at that time. He was like, I don't want to know anymore. And I was like, yeah, I think we're good. I think we're good. I don't think we need to go over anything else. So honestly, this one goes through the very basics of gender, of God's design, of a mommy and a daddy and getting married and waiting till you're married. It goes over some specific things. But yet again, sometimes you're going to be a little uncomfortable talking to your kids about things whenever you're trying to get the jump on the neural pathways. When you're trying to be the first one to present the information, you're probably going to need to present it a little before you're ready, just because of the society that we're in, because society is going to present it to your child sooner than later, unless you just live under a rock. You can do that, but I just don't want to teach my kids. I don't want to be fearful, and I don't want to just like be afraid of being able to take my kids places and do things with them, because I want to be able to go to a theme park, encounter some things, and then be able to understand it from a biblical lens. And I think equipping them with that understanding and that view and giving them that safe exposure where I'm there to answer questions, to talk about, do you understand what was going on there and how God feels about that and how we should feel about that and things like that. I feel like that is actually training ground for empowerment for my child versus just strictly not exposing them to anything and completely protecting them their whole life. People might disagree with me, and that's okay. You can be wrong. I'm just kidding. Okay, so this next one, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, guys. These books I have like used the tar out of. We have like spilt coffee on them. Pornography in this day and age is such a problem. If you're a millennial, then you were probably exposed between 3rd and 5th grade to pornography. If you're a normal millennial, I know very few people around my age that were not exposed to porn early on. Our parents never talked to us about it. They put home computers in our bedrooms. They did not protect us. They just didn't know because it was the first generation of computers. I feel like millennials now really understand what a problem is, and we're very proactive to protect our children. But if you're anything like me, you still send them to grandma's house and grandma still doesn't know. Grandma still doesn't get it. And sometimes she still doesn't respect boundaries and do what you've asked her to do. And so it's hard. It's hard to navigate like, hey mom, like, please don't put a TV in my child's bedroom and let them stay up at all hours of the night watching TV. We don't do that. We don't feel like that's safe, you know? And so it's things like these books that help me feel more at peace, being able to tell them, hey, this is what good pictures are. Good pictures are pictures of you wearing clothes. You know, bad pictures are pictures that don't cover all the areas that bathing suits cover. And being able to tell them what happens if they encounter one of those pictures. Look away, say stop, immediately go tell an adult. Really, the junior one really goes through some very basics of good pictures and bad pictures. So it doesn't call it pornography. It calls it bad pictures. It explains the gist of it. The older book really goes into what happens in the brain, addiction, how this can be addictive in the brain, how it's not good for you. And it gives some tools that if you are exposed, what you can do to think about something differently. And it really helps to be able to give words to your child to understand, because if you were like me and you were exposed to pornography at a very inappropriate young age, there were just things going on inside of you that you did not understand, emotions and things like that. So this book kind of addresses that and how like that's not good, it's not safe. And you know, looking at bad pictures is the equivalent to the brain like taking poison that can poison the brain. And so these have been super helpful for me. So my children know that if they come across something that makes them feel uncomfortable, that doesn't have all the clothes on, that you immediately stop, you look away, you turn it off, you say stop, that sort of thing. That and these two books, I Say No and God Made All of Me. These are both really good books to teach your kids about what private parts are private, that there's no such games to do with private parts. You don't touch anyone else's private parts. They don't touch yours. There's no secrets that have to do. We don't keep secrets from our parents that has to do with private parts. There's no games or prizes. It even prompts the parents to be like, okay, go over some scenarios that might happen. And so disturbingly, I had talked to one of my kids and I was like, okay, so what would you do if someone said, hey, like, I'll give you a piece of chocolate cake if you let me touch da-da-da, then what would you do? And they were like, I would eat the whole cake. And I was like, oh gosh, no, that's not the right answer. But just know when it came down to it, and one of my children was asked to show their you-know-what to someone, to another little girl around their age, they immediately were like, no. And that little girl asked again. And so they immediately came inside. They got me. It was a friend of the, like new friends were coming over with their child, church people, like people you wouldn't expect. You think that your child could safely play outside with these other little kids. And luckily, my child is very strong-willed and they said no. And then they did what was right and they came and told me. And I was able to take care of it and have a conversation. Also, with these books, the one that I have to tell y'all this story because it is hilarious. After we read it, and it really goes through the technicalities of like, this is a male body part, this is the name for it, this is a female body part. When the male body part gets excited, it's called this is what happens on your wedding night. Like, you know, a man and a wife love each other so much, they get married, that they hug in bed, you know, naked, and the male body part slips into the female body part, and then the, you know, the thing happens with the stuff coming out. I don't know what all is appropriate on YouTube, and so I'm just going to keep this very tame. And then that's how the egg attaches to the sperm, and you get the zygote, and the baby comes. So my two older boys were horrified, and they were like, oh my gosh. And I mean, it did it in a very non-sexual way, a very clinical explanation for these things. And one of my sons looks at me and he's like, has that happened to you? And he was so horrified. And I, guys, could not hold it together. I busted out laughing. And I was just like, sweetheart, I think at this time we had 3 or 4 kids. And I'm like, well, it's happened at least 4 times, you know, because we have 4 kids. And then they just like buried their face in the pillow and they're like, why did I ask? Well, like part of me is like, you know, I want to keep their innocence and I want to make sure. The other part of me is like, I do want to have the narrative on this. I do want them to understand what's healthy, what's biblical, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. You know, if you just let society raise your kid, society's going to tell you that like sex is casual, everyone has it with each other. Like, you know, like all these things that you don't want them, like you want them to know that it's between a man and a woman that are in love in the context of marriage. And you just want to paint the picture of this is biblical. There's a series that is, depending on the gender of your child, they either have books, boys books or girls books, and then they have ages attached to those. Like this is the 3 through 5-year-old. And so you can buy different ages and different genders. And since I have boys, I only bought the boy one. I'm sure the girl one's great too. And this is a very Christian approach. A couple of these are blatantly Christian, which I really appreciate. Some of the other ones aren't necessarily Christian. And so this very much gives it from the Christian world perspective. I just think, Mom and Dad, that we need to have these hard conversations, even if they're uncomfortable, even if we're not ready, because we want our children to see things the way that we see them. Because we obviously believe what we believe is correct, and we want to protect them. It's much more empowering to give our children the truth, to give them the facts, and to equip them with the lens through which they can see stuff that matches our lens, matches the biblical lens, than to just kind of learn about things as they grow, get exposed to things as they grow, and then come up with their own conclusions. I think that is much less safe. And that's much more dangerous, especially in the society that we're in. And so that we need to work hard to in an age appropriate way, which some of these books I present older than what's suggested on here. And so when you get them, you need to read them. You need to decide what's appropriate for your children. But then also, like, it doesn't give all the facts. Like, this does not talk about the pleasure aspect of the, mating process or anything. It doesn't fill in all the gaps. You can create the lens for your child to view and understand sexuality, gender, and the roles of husband and wife and how God designed things. But the only way that you're going to be able to do that is to be able to talk about it blatantly with your child in a way that's appropriate and understandable. And these are some resources that were very helpful for me, that I have felt like that have helped empower me to empower my children to protect themselves, to understand what is good, what is bad, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and the dangers of those things. And I hope that this was helpful for you.